our podcast, we're trying to basically shine a light on, the folks around the rock musicians who help create some of the best rock and roll to ever exist, really. And in my opinion, you're definitely one of those people, my man. So this is Bo from the Rock Savages podcast. So that's pretty much what we do. I also know a lot of people that interview you, they kind of approach you to pick your brain on the technicality of your studio work, but I kind of want to know more about you on a macro level rather. Just kind of go through your career, and I kind of want to talk about some of the records you've worked with, because you worked with some of my favorite bands and records that I've been listening to since I was a kid. So I know your name very well, Jack. I've always wanted to talk to you, so I guess here we go. You started as a musician first. What were some of your favorite bands in those early years?
And well, some of my favorite bands, without a doubt, I'd have to say Led Zeppelin.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd have to, say that I admire the record making of the Beatles and the innovation of the Beatles. But I was a person who always sort of preferred the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin for whatever reason.
Right.
They were more. I guess I just liked it more, and I liked the Doors a lot as well, I have to say.
Right. Yeah, I like. I was a Stones guy myself over the Beatles. I mean, of course they're undeniable, but there's something about the Stones that's so, I don't know. It's just real, man. It's real. It's just dirtier,
I enjoy the reckless element of it, and
right.
The thing about rock and roll that's interesting is that rock and roll, if you think about it, in hip hop, rock and roll and rap and country are the same thing from the perspective that they're all about social commentary.
Correct.
Essentially. Pop and hip hop, it's wallpaper. It comes and goes. There's an emotional commentary to it as well as social. But country, you have to be the real thing to be in the country scene. And same thing with the rap, unless you're on the street or part of the rap world, you don't even understand the nomenclature.
Right.
And rock is the same thing. Rock is part of a society. You're part of society. You're part of a movement. And that's political, emotionally, socially, spiritually. I don't get that from pop, again, and hip hop. That's more, it's just wallpaper. Don't misunderstand me. There are records that are new that are pop records that I absolutely adore, and I love hip hop. I mean, I work in it. I like it all. It's not that I don't like it, but there's nothing like pelvic energy.
Right. Yeah, and yeah, I guess you're correct on rock and roll kind of being like almost a spiritual thing, It's interesting how you put that. It's I've never really heard it in that kind of manner before, but it's very interesting. Are you into like any of the country reference too? It's like I'm a rock and roll guy, but I've kind of been getting a little bit into some of this country too. Artists like Tyler Childers and like Sturgill Simpson, they're taking it from a really old school perspective. They've been working with I know Sturgill's been working with Dave Cobb out there. And they're taking like a real old school perspective and kind of getting back to like real meaningful and real lyrics, And
if you think about music at large, just as a general thing, it really is a reflection of the pulse of society at the time.
Right.
And if we consider what's transpiring with Kenosha, Seattle, COVID, the Democrat versus the Republicans, and everything that is, and the list goes on, that's only going to make people want to have something that's real, because they're understanding how important real is, because it's being taken away from them in a sense. Right. They're not living real life. They can't see family members. They can't go places. They can't do things. They're stuck.
Right.
And when you lose that liberty that you've sort of taken for granted, the liberty and the freedom that this country was found on, and all of a sudden it's taken away from you, you're kind of like, and not because anyone's trying to take it away from you, just because of what's transpired.
Right.
There, you get a little bit sober, don't you? You get sober. You start realizing what really matters.
Right.
And
You're kind of sitting with yourself and kind of really being introspective, and artists are
I
probably
think
doing
you're
the same
forced
thing.
to.
Yeah.
You're forced to because you don't have the distractions of life, stoplights, people talking to you, stores, getting things. You don't have any distraction.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting cuz isolation can do weird things to people, but hopefully, I mean, I've had some talks with some different rock and roll bands over the last couple months, and the conversation is kind of turning into the same thing. It's like, will all of this isolation bring all of this renaissance of art and music back into the culture when it opens back up? Hopefully that's the case.
Well, I think it absolutely will because, again, if you from a lyrical perspective, real writers write about their life and what's happening around them.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
if they do that, it's automatic. Of course, it will happen.
Right. As long as it's an artist not writing to an algorithm.
Yes, well, of course, and that has its place as well because
Sure.
it just does. But it's not what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned Led Zeppelin. I mean, what was it about some of those records that sonically drew you in? Because I was thinking the other day, I was like, did drums sound that awesome on tape before John Bonham? The engineering of those records is just still phenomenal to this day.
Well, it's interesting. I had an experience. I think I've shared this before, but I'll share it with you. Um, I had an experience. I made 9 albums with a engineer producer named Glenn Johns, who made some of those Led Zeppelin records.
Right.
And when I did my very first session with him at Ocean Way United at the time, I did a lot. What a lot of us do is sometimes we will hire, really great drums in that we know that we like. For instance, there's some people in Hollywood that have loads of drums that they rent out, and I know them. I know them by serial number. I know which ones do what. I know the catalog.
Awesome.
So I brought some particular Gretsch drums in and some Ludwigs and a few things and Zildjian cymbals and things I thought would be really impressive and sound great. And when Glenn walked in and met me for the first time, he said, what's those drums out there? And I explained what I just explained to you. And he looked at me and he said, do you think I told John Bonham what drums he should use? I didn't.
Right.
John Bonham got behind the drums and he made the sound. And I just captured it.
Right. Yeah.
Now, but I'll tell you what I have found that's interesting is that the best drum sounds I've ever been able to attain so far, up to this point, all the guys that were really great, that got really great drum sounds, are big guys. Q-Tip is big.
Right.
John Bonham is big. Not Q-Tip. Excuse me. Questlove.
Okay.
Questlove is big. John Bonham is big. They were big guys. Tim Kilner is big. And I think there's something about not how hard they hit, but the extension of their body, because that's part of the tone.
Right.
And I think the fact that there's more weight, it's just a theory. I don't have anything to prove it by. It's just an observation. But I've always thought that was interesting.
Right. And, you could throw Steve Gorman in there too, which I really want to get into on that one here in a minute. But
well, there you go. There's another big guy.
Yeah, and big drums too for those sessions. But yeah, I definitely want to dig into that whole thing because that's an interesting and amazing story, just sonically and verbally, I'm sure. But I mean, once you knew that you wanted to be an engineer, because I know you started as a musician and you kind of got into it a little bit by accident. Once you knew that you wanted to be an engineer or produce as opposed to playing in a band, I mean, what were the next steps to become an apprentice to learn the skill set?
It's an interesting thing because that's probably my least favorite question on the planet in terms of how people can acquire or get in the game, let's call it.
Right.
And unfortunately, the consistent issue is that it happens every which way you can imagine. Right.
Right.
And for me, it's a series of events that I would call, there was a percentage of lucky, right place at the right time. Things just happen. But if you have the ability, it seems like if you have two things, the ability and the tenacity. If we look at Tiger Woods, he had the tenacity. Now, maybe he was driven by his father and his own internal thing, but he really wanted to be the best golfer ever. And he had tenacity to get there. And he had the talent. You got to have the talent.
Right.
It's the only thing I see in common is a lot of the people who are successful, if you talk to them, you'll find that this is what they wanted to do, and they want to get there come hell and high water.
Right. Right.
And it's kind of what it takes, because you have to look at this business and doing what we do as the other woman in your life. From a male perspective, I'm speaking of.
Yeah, sure.
It's the other woman. It's always on your mind. You're always thinking about it. You're obsessed with it. You might go through a few divorces. Women get jealous
Sure.
because you're obsessed.
Right. That makes total sense.
And kind of what it takes.
Yeah, I mean, to get good at anything, and you have to be fearless, and you have to be willing to fail a bunch of times to get to be good at anything. Yeah, that's a great message right there.
Yeah, it's practice, so to speak. And you just keep doing it. But the key thing I think that a lot of people might miss on is intelligence. A large part of intelligence, which is how you get to being great at what you do, is observation.
Right.
It's a constant observation of what worked and what didn't work and why.
Right.
And if there's an issue now with the digital, where we are right now, this digital revolution, is a lot of things come to you easy. So you don't ask why. Why does this sound like this? How did this get here? And understanding the root of something allows you to manipulate things the best you can. But you have to understand what it is to manipulate it. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. I mean, that's how I learn. I'm a visual learner, so I have to watch and learn and apply and fail, and then do it again in a different way just to get better at it. So it makes total sense in that manner. Yeah.
But you also have to figure out what to believe and what not to believe, because there is lots of information that's incorrect. It's just incorrect.
Sure. And there's a lot of information out there, so it's hard to sift through it all. I mean, yeah, I mean, when you say things come too easy, I agree. Like in this digital age where everything's kind of, if it's based on a big hit, it's usually algorithm stuff, and a lot of drummers. I'm a drummer, so we can talk drums all day. But
well, presets,
sure.
which I'm guilty of creating, by the way.
Sure.
But
they have a tool. It's a tool.
But I would, without a doubt, if someone said, you got to take the digital away, I'd be like, no way. The genie's out of the bottle. I love it. It's too many things that are great about it. There's no reason to not use it all. As we know, artists are really just a synthesis of everything before them.
Right. Yeah, that is correct. I mean, yeah, they're just emulating their surroundings pretty much and kind of interpreting it in their own way. I mean,
well, when you're a child, what do? You look at your parents, you walk like them, you use a lot of the same words, you learn from them. Same thing.
Absolutely, yeah. Have you done any? Do you do sessions where there's because you're known for your analog studio and your analog approach. Do you ever still record bands, or have you ever recorded bands that are completely off the grid, that you basically just slapping up the mics, getting the sounds and clicking in and going for it, and letting the tempo kind of go up and down and kind of variate based on the human interaction in the room?
I think the only way to really properly answer that is to understand that there is absolutely no rules. And again, I'm working primarily in Pro Tools. You can't take that away from me.
Right.
It has nothing to do with analog. I think there's beauty in all of it. There's beauty in all the decades of recording, and there's beauty in all the equipment in recording, old and new. And so I don't really see myself as an analog guy or a digital guy. I've been handed records to mix, for instance, that I'm like, boy, this really sounds great. Where'd you guys do this? How'd you do this? Oh, I did it in my garage with my SM57 in my grandma's garage. I'm like, what? And it's amazing.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of how it works. At the end of the day, if the song is really fabulous and the playing's really great, you don't notice a lot of the stuff. If it's balanced right, you can't fail.
Right. That kind of brings me to the next question. The records I've been listening to that you've been a part of, especially when you capture rock and roll, it doesn't really, like you said, doesn't need to be on tape, but I was always in awe of how loud and crystal clear your recordings get. Like some of your records, when recording rock bands, is it your intent to be able to crank that recording up and it still be enjoyable, but not loud enough to like ruin the listening experience.
Yeah, we call it crank factor. Yes.
Right.
It's a combination of crank factor and what I call crank factor.
Yeah. Okay.
and easy on the ear.
Right.
So one of the things that, if there's any negative to say about what a lot of us have been guilty of in the last decade is how loud can we make it?
Sure, the loudness wars that were going on for a while.
Right, and nobody wants to back down because the ear hears loud is better in a lot of cases. But you want to feel the record.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you want to be able to. You want that bass drum to kick through your chest. At least I do.
You want to feel it.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, I mean, especially in the rock and roll realm. You've worked with one of my favorite bands. You worked with several of my favorite bands, actually, but the Black Crowes being one of them. I mean, I listened to a lot of your interviews, and it seems like we never get in depth into the recording of Amorica and Three Snakes and One Charm. I haven't heard too much of the details from your end. I would love to hear more about that because they're one of my favorite bands. I've been listening to Amorica. I was a first-day buyer of that record, and it's just sonically perfect to me. I mean, how were you approached to be a part of that project, and whose idea was it to record it at Sound City?
I definitely wanted to record at Sound City because at the time it was possibly one of the best sounding rooms and also had a great recording console.
Yeah.
And that console was very unique in that when I look back on it now, I realized it had something I never saw anywhere else, which was peak meters. So what that did is it made you record at a different level than you normally would. And that's a large part, I think, of the sound of this, how it worked.
Really?
Now,
okay.
obviously Grohl's got the console now.
Yeah. Which was a good move.
Absolutely. And the truth of the matter is the console and the room work together. Separately, That's not the same thing. It's not the same thing.
Right.
Together, it had something. It was a perfect marriage.
Have you had the opportunity to...
It is definitely a magic board. No question.
Have you had the opportunity to go to his Studio 606 and try it in that room yet or not?
Not yet, but I am talking to his manager about a few ideas.
Awesome. Yeah, that'll be great because that room, apparently it sounds really good too. So that'd be interesting for sure.
Well, in my opinion, he's our John Bonham of our era.
Yeah.
He's the closest I will ever get to John Bonham, ever.
Yeah. I mean, Grohl is an amazing drummer. He's amazing everything, but I mean,
There's a record I was mixing a record for a producer who worked on the Monkey Wrench. So what record would that have been? Did I say it right? Was it Monkey Wrench?
That's the song, right? I think that's his first record, first or second. I think his second.
Color and Sound or something.
Color and the Shape?
Right?
Yeah.
Color and the Shape.
Right.
And I was mixing another record that he actually had made that record with Grohl, and he was telling me one of my favorite stories ever was that while they were mixing the record, he said to Grohl, and Grohl looked at him and they go, I don't think these drums are right. And Grohl just turned to the assistant and he said, set up the drums in the outside real quick. He played that song in one take. That was it. Done.
Well, that doesn't surprise me at all. I'm sure he does a lot of one takes. Just
he's a monster. He's just, oh my God. And as a person, beyond fabulous.
Yeah, he seems like a really cool dude. I saw the Foo Fighters once, and they opened up for the Chili Peppers. But all he did, I think half the set he played old Van Halen covers, it was just amazing. It was just so fun and cool. It's we've heard the Foo Fighters songs. I want to hear Dave Grohl do, David Lee Roth for 6 songs in a row. It was pretty awesome. But getting back to the Crowes, during that session, I mean, a lot of those songs had already been recorded during the band's Tall sessions. How did you view those developed songs and navigate the Robinsons to take a slightly different approach with it? Because the original versions were pretty grandiose. They had horns and things like that. It seemed that when you re-recorded the Amorica songs that had appeared on Tall, well, it was unreleased at the time, but they had more stripped down, and you kind of got them to get down to the original intent of them. How did that?
They've had the success of the first record, right? It's the
Right.
same thing as John Mayer having the success of his first record, or the success of any band that has what I call a successful freshman record.
Right.
If you have a really huge successful freshman record, the next one, which is a sophomore record, is the hardest record to make. A lot of people have ideas of what they think it should be or what it should be, what they're expecting, high level of what they are expecting it to be, a lot of pressure. And I think it's a combination of all of that with the additional combination of the record label thinking, oh my God, well, you just made that huge record. You must have the magic dust. Do what you want. And that's the worst thing you can do, because then they'll just go off somewhere.
Right. Which
And
they're notorious for.
which is happens a lot with artists, and I think that had happened with them. And when we got to America, they were looking to me of like, okay, help us frame this in, like help us pull this together.
Right.
And I think we were just a good match.
Absolutely.
I don't want to take any big credit or say I'm a genius, and they're extremely talented.
Yeah.
I just helped it.
Right.
But I would never say I'm the genius of the record. Absolutely not.
Yeah, right. I mean, the Robinson songwriting is just, it's really undeniable. I mean, even their solo stuff. I mean, Rich's solo stuff is amazing too. I got to meet him a couple times, and I saw him do a studio session up in New York, up at Applehead Studios, right next to Levon Helm's place, and it was next level. You could just see like this guy was just tapped into to creating, and I'm sure him and the Crows, it was just a different level, more of an ensemble kind of thing.
I think what also allowed us to make that kind of a record is that we had the time, money, and patience.
Right.
And so therefore, a lot of time was spent. There was a choice of 35 different kinds of guitars to try,
Right.
different kinds of amplifiers, different kinds of microphones. We didn't stop until it was like, that's really great.
Right. And that was per song, right? Did you just take one song at a time? Yeah.
Per song.
Did you do something different?
You can't do that now. That cannot be done now.
Really? Why not?
You don't have that luxury.
Just there's no time or no budget to do it?
Well, there's not that kind of money. I mean, the good news is
Right.
that the business is coming around to be very strong now that streaming has become just a normal thing for everybody and everywhere.
Right.
So that means that the rights holders, the record companies, are definitely raking in the money really great right now. And so I think that now will start to be passed on to artists. So I think we'll see some of that come back.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But it's also just the mentality, the Black Crows come from that older school. And so they don't have a problem rolling up their shirt sleeves and
going for it,
digging in.
Right.
That's a different kind of mindset.
Yeah, it is.
And that's what it takes. It's what it takes.
Yeah, you also did their fourth album, Three Snakes and One Charm, which seemed to be quite a different experience, because they did that in Atlanta at some farmhouse, right? How did the logistics of that work? Did you have to like ship all of your analog gear out there, or did you guys just rent gear? How that situation sorted itself out?
I have all my gear in ample cases, and all my gear has been everywhere from, France to Seattle to wherever. So when we did that record in Atlanta, I just shipped all my stuff, which was quite a bit of stuff. And I rented a few things locally. But it was also at the time, it was the cool thing was when people were wanting to make records in residence areas as opposed to the commercial studio.
Right.
It was just like a fad in a sense at the time.
Sure. Right.
So that's what we did. And everyone kind of lived together and ate together. And the most fun we had in that session is when they decided they were going to drop acid on New Year's. And I made a New Year's session with them on acid. That was a blast.
Do you remember what song it was?
It wasn't one song. I took pieces like a bridge or a verse or a second verse, whatever, cut them into some of the songs.
Okay.
Because what I did is I made crazy instruments. I thought of what could I do to any instrument to make it as out as possible. And I did that. I can't imagine what it was like in their headphones.
Yeah, that's amazing. Jeez. And they brought some horns in for that and just kind of got really freaky with it, right? I mean, that the results of those sessions, although as chaotic as some of the stories sound, I mean, they came out just brilliant, I mean,
They were chaotic. I mean, it's a different time. The Black Crowes were the Black Crowes. I mean, they were doing all the things you think of when you think of rock and roll. That was all going down, and it was fun.
Yeah, it's still fun. I'm glad they're back together, and hopefully they'll be doing some cool stuff. I hear they're going back to George Draculius for the new material. So we'll see how that goes.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, you've done other great records. You did Clutch's Elephant Riders. They're one of my favorite bands, too. And you talk about John Bonham. Man, J.P. Gaster might be really close, too, right up there with Dave Grohl. Right. He's a monster, man. I mean, we had him on this podcast, and he couldn't have been a nicer guy, but he is so technical, and he just gets down to the drums. I mean, he speaks the language of the drums. He practices like 3 hours a day before the show. He's one of those guys. How was working with them in the studio? I know you just did some mixing for them, correct?
They were great. Absolutely great. I mean, it's funny, not a lot of people talk about them.
Oh, man. They're bigger.
I don't know why.
They're bigger than they've ever been. They just went out on their own, started their own record label, and then just exploded. So they're headlining Red Rocks and stuff now. They're fantastic, but they're very cultish. Their fan base is very it's very insular, I guess, in a way, but it's pretty cool. They're
very devoted fans.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But I mean, another great drummer, very Bonham-esque. Nobody can take that man's place, but there's some good ones out there, man. I mean, do you enjoy recording rock music the most, or does the genre not really matter? You just kind of get into the headspace of whatever you're doing.
I like recording great songs.
Right.
It's just that simple, honestly and truly.
Yeah.
I'm working with an artist now, a band now from Kenosha, and in fact, one of the songs is about what happened in Kenosha. Okay. And it's not like other things I get to always work on, but it just has great songs. And when the song's really great, I'm a sucker for it. I listen to the lyrics first, melody second.
Right.
And the rest. But if the lyrics don't touch me, if I don't feel like I understand what they're trying to say, I don't think I should do it. Because I'll do it to justice. I won't do a good job.
Right. I mean, I guess that's why all of us are having this conversation is it comes down to the song. Like I was having a conversation with a friend not too long ago, and he was talking about all these young kids that are on YouTube, and they're just shredders and the amazing technical drummers and guitar players and stuff. I was like, yeah, but dude, are they writing songs, man? That's really the only thing that matters. I mean, these kids are probably just going to go off and go to college, most of them, and just have that ability, but they're never going to apply it to songwriting. And that's what my whole point was. It's like, if the song's not there, then it's not interesting, and you're 100% right on that.
I mean, that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? Is communicating about, again, emotional or psychological or spiritual commentary.
Right. And I think the way you record it translates. It's perfect.
I'm glad you feel that way.
Let's switch gears a little bit. You have also assumed the role as A&R for record labels. Are you still currently doing that? And do you enjoy that side of the business?
I had a real romantic view of what I thought it would be based on a lot of my relationships with A&R executives that come in and out of the studio. But I discovered that once you get actually inside it, and therefore you are like one of them, we'll call it, I didn't like some of the things I saw.
That's unfortunate.
And that's because, I've spent my whole life blocking for artists.
Right.
And I didn't feel like they always blocked for the artists.
Right. That really seems to be the case. I recently spoke to Blasco from Ozzy Osbourne's band. He's the bass player for Ozzy, and he has also taken on a job as an A&R executive for a small rock label. And we had a great conversation about him taking a more old school approach to signing bands and giving them a chance to develop, which I think is largely absent in the mainstream music industry right now. At least that's what it seems like. And I mean, that old school mentality doesn't really seem like a standard practice these days among a lot of the major labels. I mean, when signing a band, was that also your approach, or they just weren't jiving with that, so that you had to?
No, I don't think you can blame the labels from the standpoint that when Wall Street bought the labels and Wall Street got involved, they don't understand. They just know, like, okay, here, what is your bottom line? What did you bring in? What did you spend? And a lot of those people they're just not artistic people. I mean, they don't appreciate the art. So to be fair to labels, if you go harking all the way back to say A&M in the day when it was owned by Herb Arbert, and Jerry Moss, these were independent, true entrepreneurs. I mean, the famous thing about them is they used to tell people, we're going to sign you for 5 records firm.
Right.
And we'll see you on the 3rd record. And the artist would be like, what are you talking about? You just signed me. Yeah, I know. We'll take 2 records for you to figure it out. We'll see you on the 3rd one.
Right.
And if you think about what that did to an artist's head, like, you mean I have 5 records? I don't have to worry about my rent. I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to worry. I can just create for quite a while and not worry about feeding myself or my friends or whatever it might be, depending on the situation.
Right.
That is freedom to creativity.
Absolutely.
We don't have that now. If you don't have your 2nd or 3rd single working, or if the fad changes or whatever, there's a million reasons why you may not be able to complete your dream.
Right.
And sometimes it takes a while to figure it out. So I don't really want to paint the labels being bad. I think they just got in trouble when they didn't control the checkbook the same way.
Right. It seemed to be kind of like an instantaneous business model, like you were saying. It's
Well, there's a lot of money. When we when we switched to compact disc, the deals didn't change, so the profit was through the roof. And they just were raking the money, and Wall Street was like, I want some of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just that simple.
Yeah, it's kind of the game of the whole world, it seems, these days,
Yeah, I mean, I remember when these labels started off, they were bought and run by, people that were independently wealthy, or someone knew them was independently wealthy, and it was in some ways almost a hobby.
Right.
And then it grew into a monster.
Have you thought, because you seem kind of to be the perfect person to do this, because you've had experience doing it, have you thought about starting your own label? Because you have your own studio and you have the experience of the A&R kind of vibe, but you could do it in your own way. Have you ever thought about just doing a small independent label and just kind of going for it?
I have it because I kind of have my fingers in a lot of different things at the moment besides record making.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and I think there's a few things that I can help that are important. And to make it very simple and easy, I'm spending some time with some of the consumer electronic companies, because we are consuming the content. Not, nobody has big speakers in their house and a big stereo. They don't even know what that is.
Right.
And it's a shame, because that means that the communication of the artist is actually not reaching the listener, because it's dumbed down by the fact that the systems can't play the sound properly. And sound and audio only really matters because it's a conduit between my heart and your heart. And how big that conduit is how great I can get the emotion and the feeling for you to feel. And that's the bummer, that if you think about it, 73% of content is consumed on a cell phone.
Yeah.
Need I say? Do I need to say more?
Right.
So, I mean, if you pick up your cell phone, you're going to tell me you can hear the difference between a 26-inch and a 20-inch bass drum, whether it's got 2 heads or 1 head, or a plastic, or a wood beater. You can't tell.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's a click.
It is. It is. Yeah. Are you a vinyl guy? Because you kind of seem like you are.
I like vinyl, but again, the thing about the modern tools is they do things that the old tools don't do. And to put it simple, like bass, for instance, as an example, because of the way electronics are. When I talk about electronics, I mean the solid state digital. its ability to go from 0 to 100 miles an hour is in nanoseconds. It has a very fast rise time.
Right.
So therefore, it's very punchy and very aggressive.
Right.
The more warmer 2B analogy early stuff it's slower, but it's beautiful and it's warm and it hugs you. And there's no reason why we can't do a combination of all that.
Right.
There's no reason why, because some of the things that we like about the older records is the 3D element, the actual where you can hear inside the record. You can go inside it.
Right.
And instead of being like killed or by a wall of sound. Right. So neither one, I think they're both good in different ways, if you know what I mean.
So you're helping them to kind of develop a technology that's just gonna round out the recordings a little more?
I'm helping them. It starts with making them realize that it matters.
Right.
They don't really care about sound. What they care about is, will my phone or my laptop or whatever it is, whatever device, can I go to Germany and back on one battery charge? Is it light? Is the screen beautiful? Is it look cool like an iPhone? Is it this? Is it that? And meanwhile, you're like, it's a communication device.
Yeah.
You're not paying attention to the sound.
Right.
And it takes people like me to keep challenging them to make better sounding devices and help them make them sound better.
Yeah, I mean that's the best thing you can possibly do. Did you ever? What was that thing Neil Young was doing a few years ago? It kind of disappeared. I think it was called.
The
Pono.
problem with that was it was too. The thing about consumer look, every business has something that's the holy grail, and in consumer consumer electronics, the holy grail is plug and play. You just plug it in and it works.
Right.
And when the pro people, the people on our side of the business, try to get involved, they try to put too many bells and whistles and too many things. And you got to plug this into this and then plug this in here and it does this. It's like, no, nobody has time for that.
Jeez.
It has to be immediate and simple and easy, like an app.
Right.
That's why Apple is successful. You pick up the phone, you don't think about it, you turn it on, there's a picture of something, you push it, and you don't even think about what's happening in the background, but it's just happening and it's done. That's the problem with when the pro people get involved.
I wish there seems to be like a small movement in the country to like people are kind of trying to unplug a little more, and I think that's kind of where the vinyl resurgence is coming from. It's like, yeah, maybe you should just kind of mellow out a little bit, kind of unplug, and then just get into whatever it is, be it music or whatever, and just be.
Yeah, but the thing is that doesn't matter what you do with all that; it doesn't translate.
Right.
And here's another
thing.
Another thing to keep in mind. Another to keep in mind is that the very, very root definition of art is ever changing.
That's true.
There's no such thing of how it used to be or that was great. That's not the right way to look at it. That's boring. Art grows and changes, and you move with it, and you create it, and hopefully you're a few steps ahead of it. And that's the beauty of it. Is that it's creation and we don't know what's around the corner, but we're looking to see what's around there. We want to go around that corner. And that's the beauty. The other stuff's already been done. Sure. You don't want to do the same thing. You want to do something different. You want to take it to a new height. It's that journey and the white light and what you're trying to get. And could it be this? Could I do this? Could I get that? That's what's exciting. Just like life.
Sure. That's a great way of looking at it, man. I mean, yeah, it puts a positive aspect on change, which is happening whether you like it or not. So you kind of got to roll with it, or you're gonna get rolled over. So yeah, you're right. That's the exciting part is like expression. Who knows what it is, but people need to follow a muse, and we don't know what that looks like to an individual.
No, but that's human nature. We like things we don't want to go to the same place every time getting the same thing. We do it.
Sure, absolutely.
Right? I mean, there's your basic thing of jeans. Everyone likes jeans, and that seems to stay through every decade. The one word that never seems to go away in any generation, anywhere, is the word cool.
Right.
For a reason, it doesn't change.
Just right? what it is changes, I guess.
Yeah. It's a really interesting thing because people like, oh, that's lit, right?
Right.
Or I don't know what to pick, whatever new kind of
Yeah.
pop culture words, but
Who knows what
but
they're
you know
saying
what?
now?
In the middle of all that, there'll be a sentence that has the word cool in it.
Sure. Yeah, it's a universal
Fascinating.
meaning. Right.
It's
On.
fascinating.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. That's awesome.
And what I like about the word cool, which translates into what we do, is if you stop and think about it, cool can be different things. You could say like, that is really cool. Or you could say, dude, that's not cool.
Yeah, it's
Same
kind of
word.
it's kind of intuition too. It's like, what makes it cool? What makes it
And
not
that
cool?
relates to what we do, because what we do is turns the emotion of what we do rides on the tone. The tone is the carrier. We multiplex on top of the tone. Whether it's a country record, or rock record, or pop record, that tone is what resonates with us as humans. Like the word cool, the way I just described all the different ways you could say cool. Same word,
Okay.
but totally different meaning. And the only thing that's different is the tone.
Right. Okay. That's great. That's great stuff, man. Speaking of cool, I mean, what kind of stuff are you listening to these days? I mean, is it is it some different things? I mean, what are you working on? What do you have any projects coming out soon that we can help plug here?
I would never do that. I don't think that's right.
Oh,
But
it's
uh,
if it's a
but I
surprise.
no, I am working on. I'm working on. Well, it's funny I talked about country, because the band I'm working on, that I've been working on for a year and a half. Mixing different songs for them. I think we're gonna have a third number one, and we've already had two ones and two top fives, and I think we're under our third number one. So
Wow.
that's four top fours, or five. That's just pretty unheard of. They're very, very talented. And another band called Daisy that I'm working with, and then this other band I just told you about, that's from Kenosha.
Okay.
It's a guy named Rob Cavallo, and I have done a lot of work together. Robin Cavallo and I are working with this band, and I think the songs are like beyond tremendous. And I'm spending a lot of time on it. Another big artist, so we all know. And as far as what I'm listening to, it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I just like songs. I really do. I know it sounds kind of lame, but it's
No,
true.
no. That's not lame at all. I have that conversation with people all the time. So totally relate. And I really enjoyed this conversation, Jack. I appreciate your time talking with me, shed some light on some things. And I enjoy your records, and I always will. And I'll always keep an eye out. And if you ever need any more conversation as far as what you're working on and want to, blow something up, let me know. And we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate it. Take it
No
easy out
problem.
there.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.